Good evening. You're on the smoking section. My name is Stephen Helfer, and I think this show has been running for almost, I don't know, I think it's been running for 15 years, maybe even more. Um, Very happy to have a show here at CCTV, and I'm speaking up for those of us who are tobacco lovers and who despite all of the stigmatization and the punitive taxation and the restrictions which make it so very difficult for us to smoke, we continue to smoke out of our own free will. We are not slaves of tobacco. We were not somehow duped into smoking by the evil tobacco companies or nefarious advertising, but like so many other people who have enjoyed tobacco for the last 8,000 years, we continue to smoke, and I think many of us at this point, I think most of the people who are smoking are pretty determined to continue smoking despite all. And what there really is something that a well-known sociologist by the name of Sidney Cohen talked about, which is kind of a moral panic. It's when society all of a sudden decides something is really a danger and somehow corrupting youth and doing this and doing that, and becomes hysterical, and people think that, well, if we could only wipe out this evil, then somehow things would we would reach this kind of nirvana, I guess. And that's the way smoking is. And it's like, people think that somehow if we could get everybody to stop smoking, somehow our society would be so much better. But as I have mentioned innumerable times on this program, smoking rates have been reduced tremendously, yet medical care costs spiral out of control. People seem to be hopelessly addicted to so many psychoactive pharmaceuticals. Everybody seems to be taking Prozac and anti-anxiety drugs. And then, of course, there's the opioid crisis. And so many people are overweight. And, because if they had been smokers, they wouldn't be overweight. And the number of people who get cancer, even lung cancer, seems to be very high. I think people's frustration levels are much more difficult. Like, and when I see people driving, at one time, I think I read once in an article in in the Times that at one time in New York, almost every single cabbie seemed to have a cigar clenched in his teeth. And, that calmed him down. That made things easier to deal with. And I notice now, for example, in driving, I don't drive, but I notice that people just seem to honk their horn the second a car stops in front of them. And I think some of our road rage is because the fact that people aren't smoking when they're driving, that's not calming them down. And I think that the American Indian would never have a council without a calumet, which is another name for pipe, because the American Indian felt very strongly that smoking that tobacco cooled people out, made them understand complex matters a little bit better, made them be able to get along a little better. And I think, one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that our government and our political circumstances seem at such a kind of a crisis level with people polarized and people don't want to talk to each other, and they can't talk to each other because as soon as they start, they really just fly at each other's throats. Is primarily because we're not using tobacco. I mean, at one time, in our state legislatures, especially in the back rooms, these were smoky back rooms where deals could be cut, and political opponents could perhaps a little bit better grasp the perspectives of their opponents. But now this doesn't happen. We live in a very, very uptight society. And one of the reasons it's uptight, I maintain, is because of the drastic decline in smoking rates. And this is one of the reasons that so many people are having trouble with opioids, so many people are taking pharmaceuticals, and we're having so much difficulty just getting along. And as far as people's health improving, in the last several years, actually, the average life expectancy in the United States has gone down. So we're not seeing this rise in average life expectancy that you would see, supposedly, if people stop smoking. And part of the reason is, I think, the stress. Part of the reason is these people taking drugs that the other might not take are taking more drugs, more alcohol than they otherwise might not take. The stress, and of course, for many people, I think weight gain has been a problem, although we're not hearing so much about the obesity epidemic anymore. And aside from all that, it's just that we're living in a society now, and tobacco really is the template, where it seems that a person, an average citizen, is not being allowed to choose for himself. He is being told, oh, you can't smoke here, you can't smoke there. And there are more and more rules. We seem to be in a kind of a public health state where people in the public health profession are gaining more and more power, and they're almost intoxicated with that power and seem to want to exercise it more and more. And unfortunately, something that's come up that's the big news here in Massachusetts is that the legislature tomorrow will vote on a bill that will make it illegal to sell cigarettes to someone who is under 21. And, that means people who are 18 to 21, people who maybe have come back from Iran, or excuse me, not Iran, but from Iraq or Afghanistan and seen war, people who can marry, people who can sign a contract, people who, at least in other states, are considered adults and are allowed to make their own decisions, will not be able to buy tobacco. And in the state of Massachusetts, and this is supposed to be one of the things that has made America, or that we like to think, is that we're a free country, that the citizen, not the government, makes decisions about his own welfare and his own, whether he will smoke or drink or that sort of thing. And so I think we're moving towards a very, very restrictive society, very, very uptight society. And there has been a doctor, a guy named Lester Hartman, who has kind of been on a mission to get the state of Massachusetts to raise the age to 21. And he says smoking is the most common cause of preventable death in America. And this is a very deceptive statement because for two reasons. Number one, people in the anti-smoking fold blame every single illness you can possibly get on smoking if you are a smoker. So therefore, if you smoke and you die of a heart attack at the age of 85, it's a smoking preventable death. Now, if you were a non-smoker and you die at the age of 75 from the exact same thing, heart disease, that doesn't count. But even if you die at 85, if you were a smoker, we consider that a preventable death. And if you have ever smoked 100 cigarettes in your life, so for example, if in your senior year of high school you smoked, and then you die at the age of 85 of heart disease or of some form of cancer, it's again considered statistically a preventable death caused by smoking. So this kind of fits into this kind of moral panic where every illness, even illnesses where non-smokers are dying all the time, if you're a smoker, it's blamed on smoking. So the basic premise that these diseases are caused by smoking is very faulty. It's not based scientifically. It's just based on its ability to scare, what are called scare tactics. And in addition to that, most of these statistical deaths, and these are not deaths that are based on any actual persons dying or any kind of, death certificate saying smoking is the cause of death, which is almost impossible to do because there is no disease that you get from smoking that you do not get, that non-smokers do not get. So there's impossible to say that a person who smoked, and even who gets lung cancer, we got this disease because of smoking, because so many non-smokers get lung cancer. And so many smokers, in fact, the vast majority of smokers, lifelong heavy smokers, do not get lung cancer. So it's impossible to say that these deaths are actually caused by smoking. But even if they were, there's a big difference between dying of an opioid overdose at the age of 18 or dying in a motor vehicle accident at the age of 25, or succumbing to suicide or violence as a teenager and dying at the age of 75 or 80 after 50 or 60 years of smoking. So that when you say it's the most, as Dr. Lester Hartman says, it's most common cause of preventable death, he does not say that these preventable deaths occur in the very majority of cases in statistical persons over the age of 80. So we're talking about something very, very different, but statistics are like that. And a friend told me that his statistical teacher, actually his teacher of statistics, said never trust any statistics that you don't rig yourself. So again, it looks like Massachusetts is going to raise the legal age to purchase tobacco to 21, and it's going to happen tomorrow. And so it's one less freedom that people between the age of 18 and 21 have. And if you combine this with the fact that according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the teenage smoking rate is the lowest it's been in 24 years, that teenagers for the most part are not smoking tobacco, and they're even not using e-cigarettes, which they never really use, but even that is going down. There seems to be no reason to raise the age of 21 except as an exercise in power, and again to forward this kind of war on tobacco and war on smokers and people who enjoy smoking and those businesses which depend on them, which are convenience stores. And meantime, all of these kids are turning to psychoactive medications and marijuana and alcohol and things that impair them so that they can end up dying a violent death or something. Whereas smoking, again, even if it really did hurt you, only hurts you after 60, 70, 50 years of use. So a very different kind of thing we're talking about here between acute danger and a long-term possible danger that I think is highly, highly exaggerated. Now I think I'm going to go to our smoker of the week. I think we have a very interesting smoker of the week, and I'm not sure that whether I've had him on the program or not before, and his name is Jim Bridwell, and here he is at about the age of 68, still smoking away, and he is known as one of the pioneers of rock climbing. And in fact, he and several of his friends back in the day, and we're talking 30 or 40 years ago, maybe more, climbed the one of the hardest rock climbs in the world, which is in Yosemite, called El Capitan, and they did it faster than anybody. And as it says here in the Washington Post, Mr. Bridwell and his partners, complementing their store of ropes, nuts, pitons, and water with about 5 packs of cigarettes, completed the ascent in 15 hours, smoke breaks included. So he was a great rock climber, one of the world's best. He smoked when he rock climbed, and here he is at the age of 68. He did die at the age of 73 this year in 2018, in a disease that even the most virulent anti-smokers would not blame on tobacco, and it was called hepatitis C that he had actually gotten in some kind of very remote location, I think in Africa. And one thing I think that Jim Bridwell, again, who is this one of the world's best and most adventuresome rock climbers, climbing up sheer rock cliffs that rose, according to this article in the Post, the Washington Post, twice the height of the Empire State Building, and he would smoke while he did this. And I think that that smoking, with the effect of nicotine, it was probably very helpful to him. And I'm just going to read something from the New York Times here. Nicotine has been linked by researchers to reduced anxiety and stress, lower weight, faster reaction time, and improved concentration. So I think when rock climbing and these cliffs, really, the tobacco probably helped in their reaction time, again, and their concentration. So tobacco is very, very different than, let's say, other things that might reduce stress and anxiety, like marijuana or psychoactive medications or alcohol, because if you're climbing cliffs at twice the height of the Empire State Building, you want to have all your wits about you, your reaction time sharp. And smoking, I think, did this for Jim Bridwell. And I think Bridwell was quoted as saying something that I thought was very interesting and is particularly relevant in today's times when so many things are being told that we can't do or shouldn't do. And Jim said, "Adventure and excitement are the two things missing from civilization. Danger keeps you on your toes. You'll never feel as alive as when death is over your shoulder. Well, I don't think I personally am going to do a lot of really dangerous rock climbing, at least not at this point in my life. But I think we're showing how, when people 18 to 24, 18 to 21 are forbidden from buying cigarettes in the state of Massachusetts, what a nanny state we're reaching, and how many of and our liberty to choose our own way of life is being more and more limited, particularly when we have this kind of moral panic about tobacco, that tobacco is somehow the greatest evil. There was a very interesting interview in the Boston Globe this week also with Dr. Nora Volkow, who is from the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, which is part of the National Institutes of Health. And she was talking about the legalization of marijuana, which I don't think she's very enthusiastic about. I know a lot of people are very enthusiastic about it, and it seems that, for example, marijuana is something that everyone thinks is completely benign. Now, I know, for example, in my case, when I started smoking marijuana in college, I think it really exacerbated certain psychological issues that I had, and it certainly didn't make me sharper or increased my reaction time, or do much for my education. I think most people who know about marijuana know that for the most part, unless used very, very sparingly, it really does diminish one's clarity and one's, let's say, work ethic. And Dr. Nora Volkow, says that, for example, for adolescents to take marijuana could be very harmful because it could affect their brains and, kind of, I don't know if she's really talking from a neurological point of view, but it could interfere with their education. And if you interfere with someone's education, it reduces their ability to earn a living, etc. And one thing that is a great predictor of physical and mental health is one's ability to earn a living. The poorer you are, the more likely you are to suffer from ill health. And so she is brave enough in this interview to say that nicotine does not do that. The only thing she does say is that, well, if you're driving a car as an adolescent under the influence of marijuana, which is an intoxicant, and you crash the car, that is a death that comes from marijuana, whereas nicotine does not impair you. So you're less likely to, walk off a bridge or walk off a pier or, get in a car accident. And one thing she does say is that I kind of disagree with. She says, well, the only thing you do have to worry about with nicotine is that after 50 or 60 years, like when you're 60, you might get lung cancer. But, she's a little bit exaggerating there, because even those cases of lung cancer which are blamed on smoking generally occur much later than the age of 60. It's usually in one's 70s or mid 70s when life at that point you've lived a bunch of years, and you are at risk for all kinds of illnesses and diseases that you weren't much younger than that. Uh, Volko also says she says that people can get addicted to marijuana. I don't know. Some people say yes, some people say no. And then again, of course, there is the whole question of, is there a good scientific definition of addiction? And I don't think there really is. But it certainly seems like some people cannot stop ingesting certain things. But in terms of nicotine, I will just close with a statement that was on the British Broadcasting Network by Dr. John Britton, who is the Tobacco Advisory Director of the British group of physicians, like the American Association of Physicians, which is called the Royal College of Physicians, where he says nicotine is not a hazardous drug. It is no more dangerous than caffeine. So it's important that people know this, especially now when the FDA is talking about eliminating nicotine from cigarettes. Thanks for watching the section. Good night.